Welcome to the Becoming Superhuman podcast, where we interview extraordinary people to bring you the skills and strategies to overcome the impossible. And now, here's your host, Jonathan Levy.
Greetings, super friends, and welcome to this week's show. My guest today is a keynote speaker, success coach, and best-selling author. His new podcast, Dream, Think, Do, is at the top of the iTunes charts. He's worked with leaders and teams from organizations like NASA and Disney, and has coached thousands of people through coach training and certification programs. He's passionate about helping entrepreneurs and leaders to dream bigger, think better, and do more of the stuff they were put on this planet to do. He's built 3 successful businesses himself and published the best-selling book, Ignite, 3 simple steps for re-sparking your buried dreams and building a plan that finally works. So basically, dude is a freaking rock star. You'll quickly see in the interview that he's a huge personality who just oozes charisma and joy. He really has a 1,000-watt presence, and he'll inspire you before he even dives into the message itself. In the interview, he offers a ton of practical and easy-to-apply skills to help you identify and conquer your dreams, as well as overcome the fear of failure or uncertainty. He and I dig into some of the habits and skills that differentiate successful and fulfilled people from everyone else. If I may say so myself, guys, it's one of the more inspiring episodes we've had thus far. And so without any further ado, let me introduce you to my friend, Mr. Mitch Matthews. Mitch, welcome to the show, my friend. How are you doing?
You know, it is a true honor, and I'm doing fantastic. So thanks, Jonathan, so much.
Awesome. We had so much fun when we recorded on your show. I felt like turning the mic around and getting you on mine. So I'm really excited to hear what we have in store for the audience today.
I love it. Yeah, your interview, I can't wait to get it out to the world because it blessed my socks off. And so it's a true honor to, get to flip the mics around and get to go the other way. So this is awesome.
Absolutely. I'm super excited about it. So what's been going on? What's new? What are you up to?
You know, it's been amazing. We've, wildly blessed to get to walk this thing out. And our business is this combination of speaking, coaching, and then online training. And I say that to, from a standpoint of an entrepreneur, it's always good to diversify. But honestly, for me, I just have a short attention span. So I've got to be doing different things. And it's just been fun. I've had a lot of speaking and live events lately, which I just love the interaction with people. But I'm also an introvert who's learned to be extroverted in certain situations. And so it's always nice for me to also, after a live event or after a speaking gig, to return to my office and quietly, just be in my office and work and that kind of thing. So it's a really good balance lately, and I'm enjoying it immensely.
Fantastic. I was actually just going to ask you, I was going to say, you come off as such an extrovert, but I don't know about you, but I also am this closeted introvert. So I'm glad to hear I'm not the only one faking the funk,
Absolutely. It's one of those, it's interesting. I did a podcast on that subject recently, and I think it's, the whole extrovert, introvert, discussion is one of the most fascinating things. And it's also, I think, wildly misunderstood because I think a lot of people are probably more introverted than they think. Or maybe, it's that they can find themselves on that line. But I always say the best way to test yourself, it's not whether you like people. It's not whether you like to go to parties or whatever. I always say, the way to test to see what you are, whether you're extroverted or introverted, is how do you re-energize?
Yep.
Do you re-energize by hanging out with groups of people? If you're tired at the end of the day, do all you want to do is go hang out with 10 of your closest friends? Or are you like me that you want to retreat to a quiet room and read a book? Or, I want to hang out with my wife or just one person or, our kids, just really having a quiet evening. I always say that's how you know whether you're introverted or extroverted. And with that, then the great mystery, is kind of solved because if you're an introvert, all of us need to still build relationships. All of us still need to network. All of us need to still navigate, open floor plans in every new business now, all those kinds of things. So I always say if you're an introvert, the key is to just find those times to intentionally recharge and really be, clear about the best ways for you to do that and get recharged. Because I've found a lot of introverts, they're some of the best networkers on the planet. because, especially if they can re-energize. But an introvert's the first one to kind of focus on someone else. So I think that whole introvert-extrovert equation, and there's a new term, the ambivert, which is kind of in the middle. I think that is a really important question for people to ponder, because it's all about how do you re-energize. And if you can understand that and maximize it, man, you can do so much more.
That's absolutely true. And, it's about understanding the tools. It's about understanding yourself. And for me, it's about a good pair of noise canceling headphones as well.
Oh, yeah. Throw that into the mix. Amen.
Indeed. So Mitch, let me backpedal a little bit and say that I saw in your bio that we have quite a bit in common, but one of the chief things that I saw is we both started our entrepreneurial journeys at a very young age. So I'm curious to have you walk us through that journey a little bit from age 12 to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Yeah, we are cut from the same cloth in a lot of ways, my man.
It's the unemployable cloth.
So yeah, I actually have kind of always been somewhat of an extreme personality, I guess.
You don't say.
That's right. So at 12, I figured out that I loved bicycles, push bikes and all that kind of stuff. And so I lived in this small town in a Midwestern community in the United States in Iowa. And there was one bike shop in town, and it was kind of a hole in the wall bike shop. Literally the Goodwill store, kind of one of those thrift shops was next door, and our local strip club was behind this bike shop. So hole in the wall, but a great place to hang out as a teenager. And that summer, I just wound up riding my bike up to this shop and spending all the time that I could, hours at a time, just about every day, watching the owner and the mechanics work on bikes, and watching the salespeople sell bikes, and watching people order things. And I would kind of get into the catalogs, and I'd do everything. I'd sweep up. I'd do whatever it was that would keep them from having me arrested for loitering. And at the end of that summer, the bike shop owner and his wife decided, this crazy kid's not going away, so I suppose we should hire him. And so at 13, I kind of had my first dream job. And that's truly where I didn't realize it at the time, but the entrepreneurial bug bit me hard, because here I saw this guy creating, kind of his own world. He created this bike shop, and he could hire who he wanted to hire, even crazy 13-year-olds, but, he could do what he wanted to do. And that didn't mean an easy life. I mean, in the summer, he was up working on bikes at 4 a.m. in the morning, but it was on his own terms, and he got to do his own thing. And I just love that. And so I kind of fell in love with that at an early age. And then he took me to a sales seminar when I was 14, which was hilarious. And that's where another bug bit me. And that was this whole speaking thing. And I didn't even know that was a job. I didn't know that was an industry at the time, but I saw this seminar, I saw the speaker, and I was like, I think I want to do that. And so I started, kind of working it on the side. I sold my first seminars when I was still in college, making $1,000 a seminar as a, college sophomore, college junior. I'm like, this is the shiznits, I felt like I was breaking the law, or breaking the rules or whatever, but it just bit me. And so I decided that I wanted to go kind of the corporate route first. And I always just kind of worked the side hustle of speaking and doing these kind of side gigs as I kind of worked my, kind of hand at corporate sales and corporate training and all those things. And then in 2002, we launched our own business full time and have been doing it ever since.
Do you feel that your time in corporate America, as I like to call it, do you feel that it prepared you in any way, or did it kind of just allow you to pace yourself?
It allowed me in big ways. Now, so here's one of the things, Jonathan, I think we maybe even talked about this a little bit, but I'm a recovering worrier, right? So I grew up a bit of a worrier. And so it's one of those things where I'm not a huge fan of giant leaps of blind faith. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I need to make it a little bit more small steps of intentional faith over time. You know what I mean? And I think that's partly, just a little bit of being a recovering worrier, partly maybe just good common sense. But one of the things that I looked at was I thought, okay, I know that eventually I want to have my own gig. I know that I want to have my own company. But I also knew as I was emerging from college, I'd had a lot of great experiences, but I felt that, if I took a realistic look at my skill sets, my experiences, I knew that I still needed to learn a lot more. And I thought, why not get paid to learn? And so what I decided to do was look at different industries where I could really learn and get paid as I was growing my skill sets, as I was growing these experiences. So I went into business to business sales first, and then I went into pharmaceutical sales second, because I thought, first I wanted to just get the business to business sales experience. I'd had a lot of sales experience. I'd done seminars on sales, all those things, but I thought I want the business to business stuff first. And then I went into pharmaceutical sales partly because of how much I could make, but also I wanted to do something like a technical sale. And so I wanted to learn that. And then I worked my way into corporate training. And, the company I worked for was a $2 billion company, and I was one of the managers in the training department. They invested like $50,000 in me as a trainer and a facilitator. For me to have done that for myself would have taken years and at least 50 grand of investment. And they did that as a part of my job, right? And so it was one of those things where, towards the end, those great fit experiences were becoming a bad fit. But I think it was because I was finally evolving and kind of growing out of it. But during that time, I always said, gosh, that gave me such an opportunity to learn and earn as I was growing. And as long as I kept working that side hustle, as long as I kept working these things on the side to help me remember, this is not where I want to end up. This is more of a bridge. This is getting me somewhere. As long as I did that, I could keep myself rooted on the bigger dream, but take the time I needed to get there.
I think that's really important. And I'm glad that you touched on the worrying, because a lot of people that I meet a lot of what I call wantrepreneurs. So people who aspire to be entrepreneurial and do their own thing, but they have this idea that, to be an entrepreneur is to make these huge leaps. And in reality, I always tell them, look, it's about small testing and doing side projects and keeping your bases covered while you explore.
Yeah, absolutely. I hang out with a lot of scientists. I wasn't that smart a kid. I didn't get great grades, but I love science now. And I know we have a shared passion there. But working with some scientists recently, they shared the 2 L's of science that I think so apply to entrepreneurship too. And they said the 2 L's of science are to learn fast and limit risk.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I like that. So it's that whole thing of, of course they put on the lab coat, they start to experiment, but they're learning fast and as quickly as they can, testing out their hypothesis, all of those things. But as they do that, they're limiting risk. I mean, they're still taking risks. They're not taking these blind, crazy risks, though. They're saying, okay, how can we learn something, test it, but not, kind of do an all-in kind of risk. They say, okay, how can we limit this risk? And I think that's powerful. I love your kind of awareness on the entrepreneurs, too. I think it's something that is important. I think that there's a lot of people who are trying to be entrepreneurs that maybe shouldn't ever or maybe shouldn't yet. It's interesting. I don't know if you saw Gary Vee recently was asked kind of a great question. Person in the audience asked this question of, what do you think is one of the biggest mistakes young entrepreneurs are facing? And Gary Vee looked at him. He's like, to be honest, one of the biggest mistakes facing young entrepreneurs is not realizing they're not actually entrepreneurs. And it was one of those where he's like, I realize that's kind of a douchebag thing to say, but he said, there's a lot of people who want to be entrepreneurs. It's kind of sexy. It's a sexy time to be entrepreneurs. But he said, if you're an entrepreneur, you actually have a business, right? You have a product, you have a service, and you sell that. And that takes hard work. That takes time. That takes, there's sexy parts of it, but there's a whole lot of boring parts of it. There's a lot of aspects of that just flat out take hard work. And there's a lot of people who like the sexy, but once they start to, have some of those challenges, then they start to think, well, maybe my idea is bad because it's not supposed to be hard work, right? They've seen the book title of, the 4-hour work week, and that sounds awesome, but they just don't realize that, most businesses don't actually function that way. Or, you can move towards that, but it's that whole thing of going, this still takes a lot of hard work.
Sure. And there are millions of people, if not billions of people, who need the structure and who need to have someone else making the huge decisions and someone else setting the direction. And those are the people who make fantastic first employees.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those where, there's nothing wrong with starting there. I know for me, I could have probably tried to fart around starting my own business, but I kind of thought, why not go and learn? I kind of thought in some ways in the beginning, I thought even like my first manager was good. My second manager, not so much. And as I was doing that, I was like, okay, first I learned a ton from this first manager. And then I started to almost dismiss that second manager. And then I thought, oh, wait, this is a whole other set of learning. This is learning how I never want to lead. This is learning the best and the worst. And so to just be able to, continue to keep that perspective of being able to say, all right, what can I be learning in this situation? And then, the other part of it for me was just to be able to say, what can I be doing on this side to keep working that speaking muscle? Coaching, I didn't even know coaching existed when I first got into, the corporate world, but, I still love to pour into people. I still love to ask people questions. So I would find myself, going and having meetings, which I didn't realize at the time. I was really growing just a solid network of great relationships. And it's because I really enjoyed kind of pouring into people, asking people questions, drawing things out, helping them discover their answers, all those things. So I was working on those muscles, but I was kind of in some ways having to do it on the side. But that helped me to do it at a progression or at a rate where it could really make sense. And, I wound up marrying, the girl of my dreams. I totally married up, which is, again, proof positive. I'm a great salesman because I married up, and then we started to have kids and all those things. So it was one of those where I couldn't just totally throw caution to the wind. I needed to do it in just a real intentional way. And it sounds like it's a real straight line as I tell that story, but there's a lot of swoops and circles in there too, but it can make a big difference.
Sure. And so now that we've talked about, maybe your entrepreneurial dream isn't the right dream, I have to say that through the Big Dream Gathering and your talks, you've inspired thousands of people to actually go out and pursue their dreams. So let's touch on that a little bit and touch on what kind of dreams those are and the work you're doing there.
Absolutely. So the Big Dream Gathering is something that kind of started as a happy accident a number of years ago in 2006, where my wife and I were working on, kind of a new dream for our business. We were working on a product idea and everything was clipping along great, going great. But then over a period of about a month and a half, everything just kind of fell apart. We had a computer go down and the designs for the product crashed with it, which I'm a huge fan of backing things up, but I wasn't at the time. So we lost everything. We lost months of work. And then, we started to kind of run out of time. And then the big one was we started to run out of money. It was a lot more expensive than we thought. And this relationship with a manufacturer that we had was starting to crumble. And so, here we are kind of out of time, out of options, out of money. And my idea was to throw a party, which is crazy. But I realized I need some help with this dream. And I bet my friends could help me. If they knew about it, they could help me with it. And then I started to think, I don't know what some of my friends' dreams are. People I've known for years, I don't know what their dreams are. And so we invited people over to do this thing we called a Big Dream Gathering, where we invited people to write down some of their dreams, some of their goals, and then post them up on the walls. And then we looked at each other's dreams and then to see if we could help each other out, leaving each other notes, comments, encouragements, ideas, connections, all sorts of things. And that first Big Dream Gathering happened at our house, and it was supposed to go for a couple of hours, but we lost control of it and it lasted for a full week. We knew everybody that was there the first night. By the second night, those people brought people. By the third night, total strangers were just showing up to our house on their own. It was kind of crazy. It was just kind of nuts. And, all sorts of amazing things happened. Two people met at that Big Dream Gathering and had a shared dream. They actually, had a very complimentary dream and they pursued it and got a contract with Nike within 6 months. We had somebody who posted a dream about helping some kids in Mozambique, some orphans in Mozambique, which she was from small town Iowa, hadn't barely traveled outside the state, let alone outside the country. So it might as well have been Mars, let alone Mozambique. But somebody that didn't know her gave her $1,000 for the trip to get her started. And she was there within a year helping these kids out. Just, amazing stuff. And I kind of got addicted to seeing more of that happen, whether it's people giving themselves permission to dream or just that whole, kind of the magic that happens when you can encourage somebody else in their dream, help them out, give them an idea or, just give them a go for it, just kind of some encouragement or being able to even maybe link up and you've got complementary dreams and do it together. So we've been doing it ever since, although we've never done it in our house again. Yeah. Now we do it in, auditoriums and gymnasiums, and we do them primarily on college campuses now. And it's been amazing. But with that being said, we really celebrate big dreams, small dreams, and everything in between. We even let people categorize the dreams. We put up categories so the dreams can kind of group together. So, everything from sports and health related dreams to dreams involving, publishing or media, those kinds of things, or, business dreams, career dreams. My favorite, though, it's the category called dreams that defy categorization category, because you just never know what's going to go in there. But it's just amazing to see what happens when people give themselves that permission to dream and, kind of let it flow from there. And so it's powerful to see. And we've had all sorts, as you can imagine, all sorts of different dreams that have been posted, and then, different people taking action on those things. But it really starts at the core with a person giving themselves that permission to dream, and then also the permission to dream together, to encourage someone else, to help someone else. And it's a magical experience when people get to be in that.
It's really interesting because only in the last year or so have I actually started writing out my own goals and dreams. Previously, I had these kinds of vague ideas about what I wanted to do. And then I applied the SMART criteria, right?
Sure.
The measurable, actionable, specific. And I don't know if you saw those slides by Ryan Alice, the 1,284 slides, lessons from my 20s.
Awesome. No, I haven't seen that yet.
Fantastic slides. And we'll put them in the show notes. But basically, this guy who sold a company at 23 or 24 for 100-something million made a PowerPoint presentation, and on his 30th birthday released all the lessons he'd learned about life, business, and the world in his 20s. And one of them was actually a lot of the slides go into write down your goals, have 1-year goals, 10-year goals, 15-year goals, stuff like that. And, you should be getting 60% of them, no more, no less. And just the action of writing them. I mean, I'm staring at a whiteboard in my room right now, which has all these goals. And you'd be amazed how much more you get done just by writing them down.
Oh, it is amazing. And it's that thing of, taking something that's somewhat nebulous and then actually making it clear enough to either verbalize. I mean, that's one of the things that we talk about is if you can not only write down, but verbalize your dreams, the chances of you actually achieving them go up exponentially.
Sure.
It's that being able to, clarify it to the point of being able to write it down, but then also to be able to verbalize it to someone else.
Sure.
It's so powerful. But it also, let's just admit, it takes guts, right? Because it's one of those things to write those things down all of a sudden, especially in any kind of public forum. Holy cats. That takes guts because all of a sudden then almost feel like you're accountable to those things, right? So it's that, so I always say, I always commend people for even just writing one down because it takes courage. We take it, it's that dreaming muscle. And honestly, we don't have a lot of opportunities to work that dreaming muscle. I think it's one of the biggest crises that, I live in the United States, and I think one of the biggest crises our country's facing is that crisis that people aren't dreaming for themselves as much anymore. Our college students aren't dreaming for themselves as much anymore. And so it's one of those, I think that's actually one of the scariest things we're facing is that, people aren't just giving themselves that permission to say, what are some of my dreams? What are some of my goals? You think about some of the greatest, products, some of the greatest companies, the greatest, even sports comebacks have come because somebody gave themselves that permission to dream. And if we lose that, we're screwed. You know what I mean? I think it's a huge deal. So, and I love that the Big Dream Gathering is also one of those things where it takes courage to even come to an event like that. But I love it because, I do a talk on the front end just to kind of set it up. And we had somebody that came a while back and he came up to me after my talk was done. And as we were in the process of dreaming, and he's like, I just wanted to say thanks. And I'm like, oh, thank you. And he goes, I also want to let you know I didn't like you the first 10 minutes of your talk.
Whoa.
I'm like, oh, awesome. This guy was like a young, strapping, like wrestler type. So I'm like, well, how are we doing now? And he's like, no, man, it's great. He's like, it's great. And I said, well, what was it? Is it my hair? Well, what was the deal? And he's like, well, he said, you were talking about dreams and those people that kind of gave themselves that permission to dream. And he said, I was sitting there going, I don't know what my dreams are. Like, I don't have a flipping clue what my dreams are. And he said that first made me kind of mad and then kind of scared. Right. And he was kind of was ticked at you. And I was like, dude, I hear you, man. I'm sorry. He goes, no, it was great. And he said, but you kept saying, just give yourself permission to start. Give yourself permission to just write down one dream, big or small. Don't weigh it out. Don't filter it. Just let it come. And I said, oh, so did you do that? And he goes, yeah, I did it. And then he said, in the last 20 minutes, I've gotten 18 more. I'm like,
Amazing.
really? He goes, and then he looks at me, he kind of gets scared again. He goes, and they just keep coming. He's like, I think you broke me.
Yeah, you opened the
but it was
floodgates.
just flowing out of him. And I was like, that's what it was. And that's, I think for so many people, it looks like, especially if you hear that and you go, gosh, maybe you're in the same places as his name was Christian. Maybe you're in that same place as Christian. Like, I have no idea what my dreams are. You almost feel like you're like looking at a brick wall, right? Mm-hmm. I always say that brick wall is actually made out of paper mache. And if you just give yourself that permission to kind of poke through it, it's amazing what can start to open up. And what's great is I followed up with Christian, and he took those dream sheets home. He put them up on his walls, and within a year, he'd clipped off 16 of those 18 original dreams. Some of them were really small. Some of them were really big. But it was just like you were saying. It was because he kept those out in front of him and, stayed aware of them, kept those in his conscience, all those things, and started to just, sometimes work significant and intentional plans. And sometimes it was just because an opportunity presented itself, and he's like, oh, that was one of the things I wanted to do. And, and then he'd sign up and go for it,
Exactly.
Those kinds of things. So there is something about giving yourself that permission to just write them down, but then also keep them someplace where you can see them on a regular basis.
Exactly. That's the magic of it. I mean, how many times have I had an opportunity to do these things in the past and never done it because it's not on my to-do list of goals, but then suddenly once it's written down and I have to check it off, well, yeah, I'll go on that weekend trip to a country I've never been to because I'm supposed to go to 2 new countries before the end of the year kind of thing.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah. What a great example.
So Mitch, we've covered the writing down the goals, and in my opinion, that's one of the biggest secrets to success. What do you think some of the other ones are?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's one of those things where I think it starts with writing down those dreams. But sometimes people don't write down their dreams because they have no idea how they'd actually accomplish them. You know what I mean? Like, you start to write it down and it's like, I love this. Like your heart starts to race. Like, this is so exciting. But then very quickly, some of those objections start to come. One is, how could I ever afford that? Or, I don't know how I do that. I don't know the right people, all those things. So it starts to then say, okay, what are some of those objections that happen for most of us? And, again, a lot of times that first objection for most people tends to be, I don't have the money, right? And, it's just one of those things. And so I always say to acknowledge that, to say, okay, I don't have the money yet, but if I did, what might I do?
Or, do I need as much money as I think?
Exactly right. And to be able to go, how am I even assessing how much is this going to take?
Right.
Just even Mandy, the gal that, said she wanted to help those kids in Mozambique, she wrote it down, but then she started to just share the idea. The $1,000 gift didn't come from somebody that was at the Big Dream Gathering. The $1,000 gift came from somebody that heard about it at work, her work, like weeks later, and just said, I love that idea. I want to help. Like they felt compelled, and it was because she'd gotten clear and started to put it out there. Now, I know for her, the money thing was a big deal, but she gave herself that permission to move past it. So it really is kind of acknowledging some of those things. But, a couple of the other big tips, I even talk about this in my book, Ignite. But one of the things that I talk about is what's key is to say, okay, let's identify a dream and then ask yourself, who could you be learning from? Who could you be learning from to go to achieve that? Now, that's key to be able to say, it might be somebody that personally, maybe a parent, a relative, a friend that maybe has done something similar and you can go learn from them. Or maybe it's, going to your great friends at the library or Amazon or Barnes and Noble, the great friends on the shelves of being able to say, to draw from great wisdom of authors that are out there, those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. But as you start to learn from others, and this is something I think you'll love, I always say you have to watch out for your intellectual immune system.
Ooh.
Okay, so here's the thing. Learn from others, right? You go and get your book from Seth Godin. You go get your book from Gary Vee. You go get your 5 Principles of Great Leadership or 7 Habits of the Best Entrepreneurs or whatever. You go, oh my gosh, this is so me. This is so what I need, right? Does this author have a camera in my house? Oh my gosh, I'm so doing this. But like 2 days later, you can't remember what the 3rd and 4th and 5th habits are, or what the 2nd and the 3rd and the 7th principles are, or whatever. You start to throw those things out, and if you're like me, like 2 weeks later, you can't remember the title of the book, right? I always say that's the intellectual immune system. That's your intellectual immune system at work. And what that is I think with working with people, I've coached people that have been doing that for 12 plus years. I've seen this intellectual immune system happen. And what that is it's the intellectual immune system is not medical, but it's metaphorical. And I believe that our intellect has an immune system similar to our body's immune system. Again, not medically, but metaphorically. So think about how your immune system works. Like you travel all the time. So you've probably been on a bus or a plane lately and somebody was hacking up a lung, right? They probably sound like they had TB and you're like, please, immune system, work, right? You want that virus, that bug, whatever, to bounce off your immune system and keep you healthy, right? That's a beautiful thing. But our immune system can kind of work against us in certain situations. So I had a buddy who needed an organ transplant. He was sicker than a dog, and the doctors figured it out. They were able to explain it to him, so he understood that he needed it. And his mom was like this perfect match, so she stepped up, total hero. So she was perfect match. They found a great surgeon, great hospital, all these things. They did the surgery, and even though he knew he needed the organ, even though it was a perfect fit, or a perfect match, even though the surgeon did just a stellar job, what did his body's immune system do to that organ anyway?
Yeah, of course, rejected it.
Right. Because why?
Well, the body has a set of patterns that it goes through that are pretty inflexible.
Right. And it tends to reject those things that come from outside it, right? So it's like, this is my system. That's not my system. Out, right? I think we do the same thing with ideas. Right. And there's tons of data to back this up. But, I usually don't have to lean on that at all. I can just say, who's read a book recently, whether it's, the 5 habits or 7 principles or a diet book or an exercise book, and you totally commit to that. But, a couple of days later, you can't even remember where the book is and what the principles were or whatever those things. So it's just like go poof because they weren't yours.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say that's a large part of the kind of neuroscience behind the course I teach in accelerated learning is actualizing that learning, internalizing it, connecting it to your existing knowledge, your existing experiences, so that your brain, and actually the hippocampus does exactly what you said. If it's not relevant, if it's not something I agree with, if it's not something that I can connect to my existing knowledge, it removes it. So really the trick is to connect it to your prior experience so that your brain can't differentiate it from things you already know and memories you already cherish. That's the magic.
Huge. Absolutely. And people go, okay, that sounds great, but how the hell do you do that? Right.
Sure.
And I always say, okay, so, as you read that book or as you decide, okay, I'm going to reach out and ask for this advice, whether it's to travel to Europe or go someplace you haven't been or to start a business, whatever, start to collect that advice, start to collect that information, whatever it is, those strategies. But as you do that, ask yourself, how do I want to adjust this to make it mine? How do I want to, what can I learn from this and put my own unique spin on it? Just like you talked about, it's just that whole thing of how do you relate it to your past experiences, but how do you take that and truly make it your own? I mentioned growing up in that, working at that bike shop. One of the things that I found, I loved selling bikes, loved it. But one of the things we found as we would sell bikes, that if we did just one thing, it would just greatly increase the chance that somebody would actually take the bike home and ride it versus putting it up on a hook, in their garage or in their basement and never ride it again. And the simple thing was, as we'd get them ready, no matter how well the bike fit or whatnot, we would always stop and adjust the seat.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was such a simple thing. But what that process was that was a simple part of the process of making that bike their own.
That's so interesting.
Right? It drew out ownership. It took it from an off-the-shelf bike, and all of a sudden it was a custom bike, or maybe we adjust the handlebars a little bit or put like a spiffy bag on it or, a color-coded water bottle or whatever, get maybe some of those tight bikey shorts on there, whatever. But whatever it took to make that bike unique to them, it made it their own. And I always say, whenever you're going out and getting advice, whenever you're going out and collecting that information you're going to need to make that goal or dream a reality, always check yourself and say, how do I want to make this my own? So, because one of the things that beats the intellectual immune system is ownership. And if you can instill that sense of ownership, all of a sudden those principles, they become your own and you can remember them. You can remember them in your sleep. Those habits, all of a sudden they become your habits. And those habits are things you live by. Whether you want to or not, you're doing them on a day-to-day basis because you own them. So I always say, one of the first things you're going to need to do is say, who can I be learning from? But as you go out and do that learning, watch out for that intellectual immune system and overcome it. And as you do that, you'll be applying those strategies all the more.
Absolutely. And I love that you touched on essentially mentors and, none of the most successful people in the world did it on their own.
No. Exactly right. It's huge. That's one of the other big aspects of this that we talk about too, is that a lot of times, whether it's kind of as Americans, you are kind of individualistic and we can do this, that kind of thing. But so often we tend to be pretty independent. And so a lot of times, as you start to go after a dream or a goal, you start to realize, just like you said, we can't do it on our own, even though we want to do it on our own. But then it's almost that whole thing of to recognize that. All of a sudden we start to think, okay, I need help. And for a lot of people, needing help almost feels like a weakness. Mm-hmm. It feels like something you have to hide. And I always say, keep in mind, especially, and with doing these big dream gatherings for years now, we've seen this happen time and time again, that instead of, if people don't hide that need, instead, if they walk around like it's a puzzle piece, and what they're doing is they're looking to see where does their puzzle piece fit with somebody else's puzzle piece. We've seen it time and time again where one person's need is another person's big dream. It's kind of, well, let me give you an example. So we did a big dream gathering in a community and we promoted it and all that stuff. And a lot of times as we do that, we hear from people that are excited about coming. And we had one gal that had let me know she was super excited about coming, but she was a little nervous because she was pregnant. She was due basically on the same day of the big dream gathering. So she wasn't sure she was going to be able to come, but she was really excited. And sure enough, that morning we get an email from her saying, hey, my water just broke. I can't come to the event, but could you post my dreams? Which, it's the ultimate compliment. But I'm thinking, oh my gosh, there is a husband somewhere freaking out in the car, like, honey, we have to go. Right?
Put down the freaking iPhone.
It was like, let's get to the hospital. Forget the dreams. So we did that. We posted her dreams for her. But a couple of days later, she was in the hospital. Everything went well with the birth. The mother and child were great. All these kinds of things. But there she is in the hospital with her baby a couple of days later, and a friend comes to visit, and the subject of the big dream gathering comes up. Now, she didn't get to come to the big dream gathering, and her friend hadn't come to the big dream gathering either, but they start talking about it. And the friend said, so what is it that you wanted to put up? What were some of your dreams? And they started talking about their dreams. And one of the dreams was the gal that had the baby was an artist. And she's like, I've always wanted to have a website where I could sell my art. And maybe, I've got some other friends that are artists and I'd love to be able to sell their art, but it's kind of our own thing. And this friend's like, oh my gosh, do you know that, one of my dreams is doing websites? And they're like, what? They never had this conversation. And so they wound up working together, building a website where they were actually able to sell the artwork and those kinds of things. It actually created some really nice passive income for both of them. And it was all because they'd been willing to not only talk about their dreams, but also talk about the needs that they had around those dreams. And we've seen that happen time and time again, where if somebody had the courage to not only dream, but talk about what were some of their needs to make those dreams a reality, the person in the room, the best friend, even the stranger sometimes, or even a family member. It's just that whole thing of being able to say sometimes, that puzzle piece locked in with that other gal's puzzle piece. And all of a sudden, they were able to actually help each other to achieve their dreams by helping each other out.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a subject that's actually come up on the show before with the law of attraction, or some people may have read The Secret. I mean, once you put out that energy in the universe of what you're looking for or what you have to offer, whether you call it God, whether you call it karma, whether you call it luck or kismet or whatever it might be, somehow some force will manage to pair you with, the corresponding component.
It's pretty cool.
It's very cool.
It's pretty amazing to watch. And it's just one of those where, I know we've seen it in our lives. We just feel wildly blessed to have seen it time and time again in our lives. But, we've been able to see it with other people. And sometimes it's, building a business together. Sometimes it's, we had one big dream gathering where basically 6 people all posted dreams about skydiving. And most of them had wanted to skydive for years. And so they just decided, you know what, let's help each other out. Let's just set a date and let's all go do it. And they let me know they were going to do it. And so all of them, they set a date. I think it was for like June, and they all showed up. And, some of them had to travel a long distance. Some of them didn't. They all show up, and all 6 of them jump out of a plane.
Amazing.
And the cool thing, 5 people lived.
No.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. 6 of them lived. But it was that whole thing of, they needed each other they didn't need somebody to fly the plane. They, all that kind of stuff. It was just they needed each other for accountability, for support, encouragement. So sometimes, it's real intricate in those needs, and sometimes it's just simple, but it's just amazing to actually see that play out.
Absolutely. And I've seen that so many times. It's one of the few things that makes me really believe in a higher power, I have to admit.
No doubt. No doubt.
Let me ask you this. We've talked a lot about the importance of goals and priorities and setting goals and writing them down. Do you use any prescribed system like GTD, getting things done, or do you have any kind of system for outlining how your goals should look?
That's great. Getting things done is fantastic. There's a lot of great resources out there. What's hilarious is that I actually, I have some systems that I talk about on my website, but I'm also a huge fan of kind of keeping things simple, but in the kind of in the air or staying true to the intellectual immune system, I've kind of had to say, okay, what are my own systems? And so, as an example, I'm a big fan of, creating to-do lists as well as to-don't lists. And that's big as far as, I think actually my to-don't lists tend to be more important than my to-do lists. And those to-don't lists are basically kind of creating restrictions on certain things that I'm not going to do, or I'm only going to do them once I've completed this, this task or those kinds of things. And I just keep those as readily apparent as my to-do lists.
Sure.
And it's just such a simple thing. But here's where I'm weird, Jonathan, is that I appreciate digital to-do lists. So I use the app called Things to keep track of my to-do lists. But I'm also old school from the standpoint that you can clip them off, digitally and all that stuff. But I actually found there's more power in it for me to actually, and this sounds so antiquated, it's almost a little embarrassing, but it helps to hit home how the intellectual immune system works, because I tried a lot of different people's systems, and until I figured out I gave myself permission to put my own thumbprint on something. And I say, to everyone, like, you probably don't have to go this extreme or this weird, but so I'm a to-do list guy, right? But I found that clicking a to-do list item is not as satisfying as checking it off on paper, right? So here's my weird thing that I do is I actually print off. So I have all of my to-do list and my to-don't list electronic, and my green friends, you're probably not going to appreciate this, but I actually print off my to-do list and I put it in a journal. I tape it into a journal so that at the end of the day, I can actually, or as I'm going, I actually can physically check those things off. And I found that there's just a higher level of satisfaction from doing that. And it makes a difference. I know I just had Rory Vaden on my podcast here recently, and he wrote the book Procrastinate on Purpose. Mm-hmm. He's done some incredible things. He talks about not managing your time, but multiplying your time. But one of the biggest things that he talks about is finding those little rewards. Find those little rewards as you do certain items. Whether it's a Tootsie Roll or a piece of chocolate or something like that along the way. What are those little things? And I found for myself just that the physicality of that checking it off as opposed to just clicking on it. That was enough of a reward that it registered a difference for me. And I found so much more satisfaction. Plus, there's just something at the end of the day of looking at a to-do list that's got checks all over it. Just like, dang, today was a good day. You know what I mean? So it's simple things like that to be able to say, whichever system you're going to do, find ways to make it your own, whether they're weird like me or just, little subtle things, whatever, to put your own unique thumbprint on that. So that's, just as an example for me.
I love that. Let me ask you one more question before we kind of wrap up. Any books, a couple books that have most impacted you or your clients' lives?
Oh boy. Yeah. So, I'm a reader, so I love this question. And I kind of went back and I thought, okay, so one of the ones that I love to always put out there is Dan Pink wrote a book called Drive. Mm-hmm. And that is one book that is just a complete game changer. It's offensive in all the right ways, And if you haven't read it, you'll love it. If you have read it, I bet you loved it. But it's basically looking at clinical research, but around this question of what motivates us. And it is fascinating because some of the social norms that we've established, especially around the carrot and the stick, don't in fact work, especially in the creative class that we have now. In our current economy, the carrot and the stick often are actually detrimental to motivation. So it's a fantastic book, and I always love recommending that one. Plus, I'm working on getting Dan Pink on my podcast, so I always give him a shout out first.
Amazing.
I'm also a huge Seth Godin fan. So, we talk about experimenting. I know you're a huge fan of experimenting, but Seth Godin, it's amazing as he's progressed as an author, his books keep getting smaller and shorter, which I'm impressed by. I think it's more difficult to make your point with fewer pages and fewer words. But one of his more recent ones is Poke the Box. I'm not sure if you've read that, but it is fantastic around kind of the subject of experimenting, kind of pushing the limits, but more importantly, pushing your own limits. But it's a fast read. It's an airplane book, but man, it will stick with you forever. And then I thought another one that had a huge impact on me, and this, even kind of goes back to the beginning of our conversation about being an introvert or an extrovert. No matter who you are, no matter what you're doing, whether you want to be an entrepreneur, whether you're an entrepreneur and growing your business, or, whether you're a salesperson or whatever, is, your network makes a huge difference. Oh, but yes. I always say, it's the network is critical, but what's even more important than that is relationships. Right? I mean, relationships are truly what's so important. Yep. Because that network, it's a little bit about kind of who do you know, but also, when you talk about relationships, it's who do you know, love and trust, and who knows you and loves and trusts you. Yep. And so there's a book by Tim Saunders called Love is the Killer App. It's not a new book. It's probably 10 years, maybe 10 years plus old. But it's called Love is the Killer App. And it sounds kind of touchy-feely, but it is a fantastic book about creating value and creating relationships and connections. And he does it in such a way that's compelling, but it's in a timeless fashion. I mean, it's definitely strategies that you can weave in aspects of social media and some of the tools that we have now. But this one's kind of a timeless book. At the same time, I think it's in some ways one of the best, newest additions to the How to Win Friends and Influence People, but from a business perspective and kind of a more modern day business perspective. So Tim Saunders, Love is the Killer App. I was going to say,
I almost thought for a second you were going to pitch me on the Dale Carnegie, which is perhaps my favorite book of all time.
Well, it's one of those that that is a fantastic and incredible book. And I think Tim Saunders comes up right next to it, and I think reinforces some, but infuses kind of a newer approach to it that I think if you're a Dale Carnegie fan or the How to Win Friends and Influence People fan, you're going to love this from that standpoint. It feels like he's throwing a couple of new tools in that toolbox.
Fantastic. I'm going to have to check it out.
It's great. Yeah.
Mitch, if people want to get in touch with you, I have to admit, I don't even know where to send them because you got the blog, you got the podcast, you got the book, you got the big dream gathering. So what do we send people?
Short attention span, right?
Just so much.
The easiest thing to do is just start kind of with our core website, which is mitchmatthews.com, MITCHMATTHEWS.com. That will kind of allow you to find out about the Big Dream Gathering, about some of my speaking and the podcast as well as some of the other stuff that we're up to.
Yeah, and don't forget the book, of course.
Right. And actually, if people want to visit mitchmatthews.com, we have our book called Ignite, and it will give you 3 steps to help you kind of reignite some of those buried or lost dreams, help you to get clear, and then build a plan that finally works. If you visit the website, right there on the front page, you can actually download a full audio copy of the book as well as an action guide. So I'd invite you to go grab the book itself on Amazon. You can get it on Kindle or paperback. But if you want to just download the audiobook, we want to get it out there. We want to help people reignite those dreams. So go check that out, and I invite you to do it.
Awesome, Mitch. Give me one takeaway. If people take one thing away from this interview, what do you want it to be?
Oh, I love it. So here's the thing. I think, we've talked about a lot, but I one word that kept coming up was permission. And I know for a lot of us, it's that, giving yourself that permission in the beginning just to dream, and giving yourself that permission to maybe even write some of those dreams down, and then giving yourself permission to think, what are some of those small but significant steps you could take? And also, what if you gave yourself permission to reach out, to ask for some help, but also give some help? So give that some thought, but more importantly, give yourself permission to get started.
That's a big takeaway. I think that's the essence of success right there. So perhaps we'll end on that. Mitch, has been such a pleasure chatting with you today, and I really appreciate the time. So let's keep in touch.
Absolutely. You're one of my heroes, Jonathan. Keep up the great work, buddy.
Back at you. You have a great evening. So that's it for this week's episode. I hope you guys thoroughly enjoyed it. If so, please take a moment to leave a review on iTunes and to share it with your friends and family. Another thing is that we're always looking for guest posts and guests on the blog and on the podcast. So if you know somebody or are somebody who has an interesting superhuman skill to share either on the blog or the podcast, please be in touch with us. Our email is info@becomingasuperhuman.com.
Thanks for tuning in to the Becoming Superhuman podcast. For more great skills and strategies, or for links to any of the resources mentioned in this episode, visit www.becomingasuperhuman.com/podcast. We'll see you next time.